Welcome to our UN at Your Doorstep session today on December 10th in honor of Human Rights Day. We're very excited to have you here on this session. This is part of our Ages of Globalization course hosted by Professor Jeffrey Sachs. And every month we'll have a forum for dialogue to bring together today's world leaders and global change makers. So this month, we'll be hearing specifically from Professor Jeffrey Sachs and Keremo Odebode. And Professor Sachs serves as the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, where he holds the rank of university professor. And he's also the president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And Keremo is an award-winning poet from Nigeria and the founder of the Black Girls Dream Initiative, a youth-led organization that aims to close the gender gap in education inclusiveness through the arts, advocacy, research, technology, and sports. We're very glad to have both of them here today to talk to the students and teachers and young people. Before we begin, I just want to do quick housekeeping and a quick thank you. So thank you very much to Compass Education for partnering with the Global Schools program to help us develop innovative educational resources for young people to take action for the SDGs pre and post this session. So we're going to hear a little bit from Compass Education at the end of this session today to explain those pedagogical resources a bit more in depth. And lastly, for some housekeeping, please everyone mute your microphone, use the chat to ask questions, to share your thoughts on the discussion today. Please turn your camera on if you are comfortable. It's great to see all the faces of students around the world. We're going to be having a few interactive polls, so please get your phones ready to participate in the interactive polls. If there's any technical issues, please message me or my colleagues, Katya and Isabella, in the chat. And we are very, very excited for this session today. So before I turn it over to our student moderator, our first one, which is Ward Katter, which is a 15-year-old student from English Talent School in Jordan and is enrolled in Ages of Globalization, we want to kick us off with a very short poll just to see what the students are thinking out there and to share 2 or 3 words that you associate with human rights. So please get out your phones and scan this QR code. So you'll have to hover your phone over the QR code, go to menti.com and put in 6901-3468. That's also in the chat, just so we can get an indication of everyone in the room here and some ideas going before we start our discussion. So I'll give you about 20 seconds to do that. And the link is also in the chat. So thank you so much, Katya, for sharing the link in the chat. And it would be great if the students could also message where you are joining us from around the world. I see Malaysia, Turkey, Nevada, UAE, Pakistan, Nigeria, UK, Virgin Islands, Uganda, Egypt, Missouri, Italy, Texas, Mali, Abu Dhabi, Armenia. That's great. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and let's see what we have said. What are 2 to 3 keywords we associate with human rights? Wow, we have 109 responses so far. Justice, equality, freedom. Professor Sachs, do you have any reaction to these words?
I do. Let me say hello to all of the students and thank you for being part of this course. It's very exciting that we're together and for being today at the UN at Your Doorstep. And I love the words that you're showing: justice, equality, freedom, dignity, education. Of course, these are all very relevant for the question of human rights. And I'm going to start the discussion of human rights actually with the person that I regard as America's greatest president in our history, and that was Franklin Roosevelt. He was our president in the 1930s and 1940s during the two huge crises of his era. One was the economic crisis we call the Great Depression, which was a worldwide economic crisis. And the second was World War II. And in the middle of those 2 decades, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR as he was called by everybody, gave a speech in 1941 where he talked about the 4 freedoms. And this was a very inspiring and beautiful speech. And what were the 4 freedoms that he talked about? He said freedom of speech, you can say what you want, freedom of belief and worship, you can believe in your own religion, your own faith, freedom from want, want meaning freedom from poverty, freedom from deprivation, and 4th, freedom from fear. So 2 of these freedoms were the active freedoms of speech and belief, and 2 were protections, rights against material deprivation, in other words, poverty, extreme lack of income or inability to get health care or to have enough to eat, and freedom from fear. That is in our neighborhoods, violence, or because of war, or because of terrorism, or other destructive forces that kill people, maim people, dislocate people. And I think that this remains today. This is now more than 80 years ago, 83 years ago. It remains a wonderful starting point for thinking about what are human rights. They are the rights to our beliefs, and they are the rights to our physical survival and our ability to live in dignity. One of the words on the page is dignity. And of course, peace is there as well. And so I think the ideas that Franklin Roosevelt put forward in 1941 still, for me, resonate very much. Then President Roosevelt died in 1945. One of his last accomplishments was getting the UN ready to be launched. It didn't start until after he died, but he was the leader that is most responsible for us having a United Nations. And the UN was launched in 1945 in part to secure these 4 freedoms. And in 1948, a big step forward was taken on human rights. Very interestingly, by the wife, the widow of Franklin Roosevelt. Her name was Eleanor Roosevelt. She was a wonderful, super intelligent person. Her statue is in a park right near my house because she's really beloved of the people of New York. And she led a commission at the United Nations, a worldwide group at the UN, to formulate a document to describe human rights in more specific terms. And this document exists till today. It was adopted in 1948, and it's the basis of the UN's system of human rights. It's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's a beautiful document. I hope all of you will have time to look at it because you can find it online and read this proclamation, this declaration of human rights. And what's nice about it is that it says that our rights come from our human dignity. Everybody has rights because they're human beings, and human beings are born free and in dignity. And therefore they have these rights, these four freedoms that Franklin Roosevelt described. But the way they're described in the Universal Declaration is that people have their civil rights, which are their rights to belief and speech. They have political rights, or should, which is their right to participate in governance in the way that their villages work, or their cities work, or their nations work, or indeed as the world is supposed to work together. And people have economic rights, not only, or I shouldn't say only, but civil rights to be sure that nobody can attack you, no violence, but also economic rights. For example, that every young person like you has the right to education. Everybody has the right to health care. Everybody has the right to social security, meaning if you're impoverished, if you're elderly, if somebody is disabled, to have protection, to have an income, to have support from government. And in addition to these rights, the civil and the political and the economic also were recognized increasingly cultural rights as well, that people have the rights to their communities, the cultural practices, and rights as groups, minority groups in countries to practice their religion, for example. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted in 1948. It's now 76 years in existence. It gave rise to many, many more UN agreements. Some are called covenants, like the covenants on economic, social, and cultural rights adopted in the 1960s, which aim to implement the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And there's a Human Rights Council at the UN, which is supposed to investigate human rights abuses. I think everybody knows this doesn't work all that well. Governments abuse their own citizens. They certainly abuse people of other countries. They go to war against them. They commit terrible crimes. And we don't have, until today, a global system that actually protects human rights. We don't have a way that very poor people can be guaranteed that they have access to healthcare, education, and so on. Maybe even their own governments are too poor to guarantee that. And the rich countries sometimes say, I don't care, it's not my business. And so they don't honor their obligations internationally. So we have human rights as a wonderful concept, as a concept of human dignity, as a concept of protection for each of us, as a guarantee for each of us of the four freedoms, the freedom of expression, the freedom of worship, the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. But we live in a very imperfect and dangerous world right now where those freedoms are not being respected. There are too many wars, too much violence, too many governments that mistreat their own citizens or the citizens of neighboring countries.
Professor?
this doesn't mean that human rights is useless. It's an ideal. And we need to strengthen the processes to achieve human rights. Let me just conclude by one observation to clarify an important point. The UN declares that it is based on three basic pillars. One is peace, and the purpose of the UN above all was to stop future wars. The second pillar is human rights. So the whole UN system is geared towards achieving these rights, even if it's only imperfect so far. And the third pillar is sustainable development, meaning that in each part of the world, there is economic progress consistent with environmental sustainability so that living standards can improve and human dignity can be achieved in practice by all. So I will stop there and back to you, Amanda.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a wonderful overview for the students, and I want to make sure we have time for our student questions as well. So I want to pass it to Ward to ask you a question. Ward is taking Ages of Globalization.
Hello, Professor. I hope you're doing all right.
I am. How about you?
I'm doing well as well. Thank you so much. I'm very interested in talking with you and having a proper conversation. And I'll be asking you a couple of questions surrounding human rights. Now, the main topic, I would like to just introduce human rights really quickly, which is what is usually, and you already introduced it, which is wonderful, but it's usually represented as the fundamental freedoms and protections inherent to all individuals, regardless of their nationality or ethnicity or other characteristics, especially the ones that they were born in. And that's something we often neglect in this world. They're also the foundation to dignity, justice, and equality, and they must be mandated to every single individual. And I see that with the Ages of Globalization as well, where you try to establish human rights through a vision where it preserves the dignity, justice, and equality of individuals. And despite the conflicts that we go around with today, such as the resource wars or the inequality or the environmental crises, we should take it as a priority of these critical challenges and abolishing them in our world. And the topic is for today is why are human rights essential in today's world, and who holds the responsibility to protect them in the face of current global challenges? And this is
Great.
a very important topic I'd like to address today with you. And can I just have your opinion on it really quick?
Yes, and Ward, can I ask you where you're from?
I'm from Jordan, and we're currently surrounded by a lot of like deprived human rights and countries that are facing a lot of critical challenges.
Yeah, and are you in Amman, actually?
Yes, I'm in Amman.
Great. It's a wonderful place, and I've had the chance to visit many times.
Thank you so much. It really is wonderful, especially the people that are surrounding it. Like they all really care about human rights and the religious perspective of human rights and how they can encounter or um, like actually experience human rights and care about it in general.
Let me address your question. Why are they important? Well, without human rights, the quality of our lives is so degraded. We will live in fear. We will live without trust. People will be very unhappy and actually in danger. So human rights is almost a requirement for the kind of quality of life or happiness or thriving that we aspire to. And at the core of all that we're thinking about, the question is the common good. That is to make our lives meaningful, valuable, thriving, happy. And human rights aims to accomplish that. Who holds the responsibility? This is a very big challenge. Of course, each of us has the responsibility to respect the rights of others and to understand logically and even philosophically and also emotionally why it's important that we are promoters of human rights and decency for others, because I think the golden rule is at the core of this. We should treat others the way we would like others to treat us. And I think that this is the most basic point of how we should behave. Now, governments have a big responsibility because governments are very complicated. On the one hand, we need them to help achieve our aspirations. They have to build roads, they have to make electrification, they have to support economic development. At the same time, though, with all that power, governments can abuse their own people. They can be used for narrow interests, for the ruler's personal interest, or for a particular clique or tribe or ethnicity within a country. Or some governments are pretty bloodthirsty. They want to go conquer other countries or dominate other countries. And so governments have a huge responsibility, and there's a big problem always. In Latin, it was said, who should guard the guards? If the government is to be the guards, who looks after the guards to make sure that they're doing the proper thing, rather than abusing their prerogative? And this is still an unsolved question. But I want to add another dimension to this, and that is international responsibility. The idea of the UN starting in 1945 was that each government has a responsibility not only to its own citizens, not to abuse them, not to cheat them, but also to the rest of the world as well, to abide by shared standards, to abide by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to abide by the UN Charter. But I believe as well that rich countries have a responsibility to help poor countries to create more fairness in the world. And after all, the rich countries typically were imperialists in the past. Some of them are still imperialists, and they abused the poor countries, so they actually owe it to the poor countries. It's not only being nice, they committed crimes in the past. Almost every European country and the United States committed crimes against weaker countries. And so there's a responsibility by the powerful countries to help the weaker countries. Unfortunately, if it's hard to control the guards, it's even harder to control the superpowers. So it's hard to tell the United States what to do. I try, because I'm an American, and I say, we should do this, we should do that, we should be better. But it's extremely difficult because there's a lot of arrogance of power. And so when people are arrogant, they forget that they have responsibilities. They forget that other people have rights. And this is the practical difficulty that we face right now. But that's why I think it's good that we have global goals like the Sustainable Development Goals. We have global declarations of human rights. We have international treaties. And we have to remind all of the governments of the world, and I have to remind my own government all the time, that there are responsibilities that go along with wealth and power. And they don't want to hear about it often, but I think this is very, very important.
All right, sounds really interesting. And I like one of the statements you said, that governments abuse their own citizens as well as abuse the power that they behold. And this leads to a question that one of the audiences have been putting is by Maria Lapazzani, which is, what can students do to promote human rights worldwide? And take into consideration that there is a governmental role being implemented, but students must still have an input or a role to promoting human rights worldwide.
Well, I think, first of all, what you're doing right now, studying sustainable development, understanding the SDGs, reading the UN Charter, reading the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, being aware of the world situation and the crisis and why we need the SDGs, why we need peace, and so forth, is a very, very big part of this. Because what we need to do is to emphasize that we're all in this challenge together. We are all facing similar problems around the world. Our governments need to work together. Our cities need to address sustainable development. Our schools need to address sustainable development. So I think your knowledge, understanding the history of these concepts, and working to achieve the sustainable development goals is the most practical way that we can all contribute to human rights today.
All right, sounds very good. And something that's very interesting is that human rights comes as or providing human rights comes as a shared effort, whether it would be individual efforts or governmental efforts. We must all take into consideration that we hold accountability on this topic and what must be done towards human rights. And we have another question from Emerson, and it states: to what extent does Western media accurately report on China's treatment of the Uyghur people? How much of this coverage is influenced by political agendas? And we can actually widen this question further to what extent do media accurately report on the treatment of marginalized groups and minorities worldwide, such as the Uyghurs in China, uh, Rohingyas in Myanmar, Dalits in India, indigenous people in North America, Palestinians, Kurds, and others around the world? And how much of this coverage is shaped by the political agendas, cultural biases, or the geopolitical interests?
Aha, very good. Well, I would say the media, the mainstream media, where big companies own television networks or channels, for example, or major newspapers in my country, in the United States, are very much shaped by the geopolitical agenda. So they tend to follow the line of the US government, not the line of truth. And when the US wants to attack another country through information warfare, it uses the media to do so. When the US government doesn't want to attack another government, it ignores the human rights abuses. I'm very sad to say the biggest violation of human rights in the world today, the most urgent, is nearby you in Gaza. The people of Palestine are suffering terribly from, I believe, war crimes, very serious war crimes by Israel. But our mainstream media does not want to say this very often. But it's so bad that even the International Criminal Court indicted the Prime Minister of Israel recently. And this is a very serious point. And the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel's occupation of the Palestinian lands is illegal. And one way to promote human rights is to promote international law. And so when the international legal system, like the International Court of Justice, makes a ruling, that is a much more objective decision, most likely, compared to what one would read in the mainstream media. So all of this is to say, learning to be good, careful readers, and always question when you read. You don't have to say it's false. You have to say it might be. I have to understand more deeply. I should listen to alternative sources and try to find the truth. I should try to talk to somebody who actually understands this, or ask my teacher to suggest some readings that we can understand the situation more deeply. This is hard work, to know the truth, because there's lots of propaganda around, or lots of narratives that often fit the geopolitical agenda. I have to run to another event in one more question, so maybe we take one more question. I give one
Yeah.
more short answer.
All right. Sounds good. Uh, we have a question by Narjas Begum, I'm pretty sure. He states, do you feel the veto power in UN is getting misused? How can we justify human rights to the world when there's core problem at the very start?
The idea of the veto power is that in the most important chamber of the UN, which is the Security Council, which after all is the one that's supposed to end wars, we have a situation built into the rules where any of five countries, which were the most powerful victor countries at the end of World War II, have the right to veto what the other Security Council members vote. So those five countries are the United States, China, Russia, Great Britain, or the United Kingdom, and France. And each one of them can veto a vote. The Security Council has 5 permanent members and 10 short-term members that rotate. So it's 15 governments. But I'll just give you one example. I believe it's very important that there should be a state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel. And the International Court of Justice has said that Israel's borders should be those from June 4th, 1967, that Israel has to withdraw from occupied Palestinian territory. And I think this is correct. And that would allow for a state of Palestine as a sovereign state and as a UN member. Well, this issue came up in the UN Security Council last spring, and there was a vote, and the vote was 12 countries in favor of Palestinian membership in the UN. One country vetoed, the United States, and 2 countries abstained. So it was an overwhelming vote, but it was enough for the US to veto it to stop the whole process. This is not right. Maybe what could happen is these countries could have a veto, but then that veto could be overridden. For example, you could say, all right, a major power can veto, but then if 11 of the 15 or 12 of the 15 come forward and vote for it, that overrides the veto of any one of the permanent members. Of course, the permanent members hold on to their veto. They love their power, but it makes the system fail to be able to achieve peace and solutions, often because one of the big powers, it's often the United States, stop an agreement that all the rest would agree to. Let me thank all of you for your great work as students, and what fantastic questions. And Ward, thank you so much for guiding the conversation. And for
Yes,
all
thank you
of
so much as well.
yeah, all of you being in the course. We're going to count on you to be ambassadors for this course and for helping to propagate this knowledge worldwide, because if we can get everyone to understand all of this, really the world will be a better place. So thanks for all of you for everything that you're doing, and
Thank
appreciate
you so
the
much.
chance to be with you. And Happy New Year and happy holidays to everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so
Bye bye.
much. Uh, we'll move now on to the interactive poll, which should be displayed on the screen. All right, this is an interactive poll which is about human rights, and we'd love for everyone to share their perspectives on human rights. You can scan the QR code or go to the following link that is displayed down below. And please, everyone participate. It'd be very interesting in seeing your perspectives, and it'd be very interesting as well. So we're just gonna wait till all the answers or the messages have been sent to the interactive poll. All right, it's just gonna load. All right, this is very interesting. Uh, the very first question was, "What do human rights mean to you personally?" And yeah, the answer is pretty clear. It's all of them, because human rights really does mean a lot of things, as Professor Sachs said, that there are a bunch of freedoms and a bunch of rights that must be taken into consideration, and we cannot neglect one human right in order to establish another. And this must be taken into consideration when establishing human rights and taking them into perspective. On to the next question. What human rights issue do you think requires the most urgent attention globally? And this is a very interesting question because we get to see a lot of students' perspectives on the priorities of human rights. And the first one was freedom and safety. The second one was freedom of speech and expression. Third was access to education. Fourth was gender equality. And fifth was climate justice. Now, the first one, which was freedom and safety, which the majority voted upon, is very significant because freedom must be mandated to every single individual within this world, and this is to preserve their dignity as well as their individualism, where humans must have the freedom and safety that requires them to live and pursue life. And then onto the freedom of speech and expression, where people must actually have also a freedom of speech in order to have their opinions justified, or their beliefs and what their worships or their wants, and what they personally believe in. Access to education is next, and this is also really significant because education is what practically shapes an individual within life, and it becomes as a standing point in what they believe in. On to the next question. What barriers prevent young people from fully enjoying their human rights? And we also get to see the perspective of students and young people to see how uh, they see the limits of human rights and how people stop enjoying human rights. And one of the most important ones is limited access to resources and opportunities, where a lot of people are being deprived of the opportunities that give them a perspective on human rights, as well as actually enjoying the human rights, as well as the lack of knowledge. The lack of knowledge about human rights is very significant as well, because as a student myself, I was very unaware of human rights as a child, and I was not aware of what is going around me in this world. And just knowing what is happening or what human rights are being deprived from people is also very significant to paint a perspective in the audience or a person's vision. Now on to the next question. What would you do if you witness a violation of human rights? uh, so report it to an authority organization. This is what most people do, and this is very interesting because people or humans tend to take action when they see someone being violated of their human rights. And 48 people is very wonderful because people actually now have an initiative to take action upon it. Share awareness on social media, what many people do around us, or join an organization or a community or action. What This is practically what many people also try to do. And the four people that do answer unsure of what steps to take, this is completely fine, as not everyone is being guided properly towards what must be happening. And a lot of people are also afraid of the repercussions of facing the violations themselves, where an individual may also face the same repercussions. So let's say a person is being violated of their human rights, just trying to take action or trying to help that person may also have you abolished of your own human rights. And this is something very terrifying for a lot of people, and this is completely fine to think that. And this is why we must take into consideration of human rights not only by individual action, but also governmentals and businesses, and a lot of people must even take it into consideration. And I think that was the very last question of the poll. Thank you everyone for answering, and thank you for the great time. I would like to give the mic to Gaspar Roblick, and he'll be introducing himself. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all here today. My name is Gasper, and yeah, I would like to continue this great discussion that Ward and Professor Sachs started with the second discussion question: How can young people and communities contribute to advancing equality, inclusion, and protection and of human rights particularly in addressing challenges faced by marginalized groups. And I'll be continuing the discussion with Karamont Odibody, as mentioned at the start, an award-winning poet and lawyer from Nigeria. So hi to Karamont, and maybe I would like to start with the first question and adding on to Professor Sachs. What current challenges to human rights do you see from your context, especially when it comes to young people?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gaspar. Hello, everyone. It's really lovely to be on the call today. And it was really amazing to listen to Professor Sachs and talks about human rights, which is basically something he's definitely passionate about. And thank you for the question, Gaspar. When we look at the world today, there are a lot of human rights challenges, a whole lot across the world, especially for young people. And then sadly, in the world that we live today, young people are one of the major demographics, that are victims of human rights violations across the world. And it's no longer news that so many young people from across the world do not have access to quality education. The world that we live in, over 250 million children are out of school. They do not have access to go to a school to get an education. And specifically, Nigeria, where I come from, has over 20 million children that do not have the right to go to school. And this is a human right problem. This human right challenge that we're talking about is not just limited to Nigeria alone. It is prevalent in so many countries like Somalia, like Niger, like Kenya and Gambia. And then today we are celebrating or commemorating a day of the human right, which is December Day. And then thankfully it also coincides with last day of the 16 days of activism. And the 16 days of activism is a 16 day for us to talk about the violence that is perpetrated against girls and women. And then we see that young people are also victim of this problem. Globally, it is said that 1 in 3 women or girls will experience violence or have experienced violence in their lifetime. And that is a very huge number, a huge statistics. It means that when we put 3 young people, young girls or women in a classroom, one of them, one of those 3 girls or women has experienced violence or will experience violence in their lifetime. And this is a huge number. This is a human rights challenge that young people, are facing. And look at the situation that we have in the world today in Afghanistan. Girls and women do not even have rights any longer. They do not have the right to speak up, to express their voices, to even have access to quality education. And this is not limited, to Afghanistan or some other countries. It is everywhere. And when we look at youth unemployment in the world today, it's a huge number. Young people every day are facing a whole lot of problem when it comes to unemployment. The unemployment rate is skyrocketing. And that is also it's a human right challenge because this leads to poverty. This leads to inequality. That's a whole lot. Let's come to digital exclusion. There is limited access to digital technology by young people. Not everyone is equal on the internet. Some young people do not have internet connectivity. And this is creating a whole lot of digital divide for young people to participate in a global conversation, to have their voices and so many things. So there are a whole lot of human rights challenge. And I just to wrap that up with a few things that I've said, and I'm very sure, and I know that it's not limited to what I've said. So we can see that we have a whole lot of human rights problems or challenge that young people like myself and yourself have facing in the world that we live in today.
Thank you very much for this extensive answer. And you also touched the topic about equality and inclusion. And I think you already told us a lot about that, but how do human rights relate to equality and inclusion?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. We should know that human right is like the foundation. It is the foundation that we put everything on. It's the foundation of equality, is the foundation of inclusion, and the human right to recognize that everyone, every individual has dignity, no matter where they come from, no matter who they are, no matter their gender, or if they have money in their pocket or they do not have. When we look at it, that is what human right it is for us. Everyone has dignity. Everyone should have dignity. And when we look critically at equality, equality is saying that as people, as individuals, we should have the same right and opportunities as any other person. If I am in Nigeria, I should have the same access, the same right and opportunity as somebody living in the United States, as somebody living in Afghanistan, or somebody living in China. That is equality for you. And inclusion is telling us that no matter what we do, very much important, no one should be left behind. That is inclusion for us. And now let me put this into context. And that is using one of my favorite SDGs as an example, and that is SDG 4, which is quality education. It says that, so when we want to relate human right and equality and inclusion to quality education, that is SDG 4, it's saying that everyone should have access to education. That is human right. Amazing. Now, if you want to talk about equality, it means that everyone has to have access to that human right of quality education. So if you're a girl, or you're a boy, you should have access to education. If you're living with disability, if you're not living with disability, you should have equal right. That is equality. And inclusion is also now the equitable access to these opportunities to thrive, then we talk about gender, then we talk about race, then we talk about socioeconomic background. So human rights relate well to equality and inclusion, and it is the foundation that both equality and inclusion lies on.
Thank you very much. And what does taking action for human rights look like? That is, what steps can individuals, communities, and governments take to improve the human rights issues that you just brought up worldwide?
Absolutely. Taking actions for human rights is very important. And it's not just on a large scale level, not just on an international level. You can take actions for human rights from where you are in your classroom, on the dinner table, you can. And then taking action for human rights is also doing it individually and also coming together to collaborate among young people, individuals, communities coming together to take action for human rights, to speak up. Also, government collaborating to say, to take actions for human rights. And as young people, as individuals, one of the things that you are taking actions for human rights is being on this conversation with myself and Professor Sachs. That is you taking actions for human rights because you are excited about educating yourself about human rights. You want to have a voice, you want to have a conversation, not just in your local community, but also in the global community. So that is one of the steps to educate yourself about what are human rights? What are the rights that I have? What are the rights that young people around me have? How can I make sure that these rights are not trampled upon? That's one of the actions we can take as individuals, and also to speak up for ourselves and also to other people. When we are in a situation when somebody's right is being trampled upon, we should take a step forward and advocate not just for ourselves, but for other people, amplifying voices of young people, of marginalized communities, of individuals. That is very important. And also another ways for us as individuals to take action is to start holding ourselves and our government accountable, through advocacy, through engaging civic engagement. That is very important. These are the ways we can, take actions as individuals and as a community. Community are great, we have to come together. This is a community of advocate right now. Let's come together to have dialogues about human rights. Those are one of the ways we can have conversation. These are one of the ways we can take actions, and also coming together, to implement advocacy projects, to implement programs that, address the human rights problems in our community. So it is us finding solutions to local problems in our community. That is one of the ways we can come together as a community to take action. And as government, the government has a whole lot to do when it comes to taking action for human rights. Look at the world that we live in. It's a mess. There is war left and right. It's 2024, and there is war, and the human right of people are still being trampled upon. It's something that is very sad. And one of the ways we can, our government should be able to, have policies that support, that push for the right of people, that protect the right of people that that inherently do not have the voice to talk for themselves. It is very important. And also, government should look inward and outward, that it's not, no one is an island. And then it's also very clear, if everyone is not equal, then none of us are equal. I live in the United States, or I live in Nigeria, I am not equal, but because young girls like myself do not have access to quality education in Afghanistan, that is not an equal world. So really, we have to take action by speaking up, using social media as young people, take actions, advocate, join conversations, volunteer for clubs that implement programs on human rights. These are the ways for you to take actions, and know that your voice is very powerful. So, and then start using your voice. It can be on the dinner table, having conversation with your family, and then somebody's talking about it is a girl's fault for her to be raped because she was putting on a skimpy cloth. That is a way for you to take action for human rights, to say on the dinner table that it's no girl's fault to be sexually violated just because of what they are putting on. That is one of the ways you can take actions for human rights, starting from your dinner table, from your friends, from your community. Then use your social media to talk about the right of other people.
Wow, thank you so much. And we have one more question from Martha from Kenya. And that is, what role can young people play in advocating for human rights amidst the current political and social crisis?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Martha from Kenya. Kenya is an amazing city. And then we see that, the global south has a whole lot of problem. And Kenya specifically, the climate crisis in Kenya is so, so sad. It got to a point that a young classes has to be cut off. I mean, schools has to be shut down because of the climate crisis. So I really love that we have a question from someone from Kenya, and specifically a young person. And there are a lot of things that you can do as a young person to advocate for human rights amidst this current political and social climes that we have. And then I think I mentioned that in my previous conversation. And we should know that as young people, we are very powerful. And older people know that we are powerful. They know we have the voice. We have the intelligence to bring up amazing conversation. And that is why they are systemically excluding us from the table. I mean, enough of the tokenism. Young people have the right to talk for themselves, to advocate. So it's high time that to world leaders to start listening to us. And as young people listening to me on this conversation today, you should know that you are part of the stakeholder, and you can drive change and innovation for human right. And one of the ways you can do that is to advocate, by using your social media, by using any platform to talk about the injustice that people in your community are facing, or people that are your friends, that are your community members in your schools are facing. Use your voice, coming together as a collective and taking collective action is one of the ways for us to advocate for human rights. And how the way is for you to step into the shoes of leadership. Very much important. Leaders, most times are not called upon. They find themselves, in that position of leadership because of circumstances, because of issues. They just have to step into that shoe. And as young people, you can do that, by leading campaigns against human rights, by coming together to talk about ways to shape your community, by taking action for the climate, for gender, for quality education. Those are the ways that you can lead movement campaigns, come together to mobilize campaigns for human rights. Those are one of the ways that you can do that. And also another ways you can do is for you to get into the system. That is policy. Policy is very important. It shapes the way that the world will move. So as young people, find a way to get into the system of policy making. So participate in local politics and find a way for you to shape policies in your community. That's very important. Look at conversations on a global level that people are talking about, conversation that is going to transform the future. Hide your voice to it. Don't think your voice is too little. Don't think because you're a young girl from a village in Kenya or from somewhere in China, then the world is not going to listen to you. It's a lie. The world is ready to listen to what you have to say. And trust me, you have amazing stories, lived experience, and solutions to share to the world. So when you have the opportunity to add your voice to conversation, not just on a local level and also on a global level, I would implore you to take actions. And lastly, is as young people, we should try as much as possible to talk to our peers. You're having conversation. Let's educate ourselves. Those are one of the ways for us to advocate for human rights. And by sharing the knowledge we know about human rights and also teaching our families, our peers, on how to demand for their right. And then I think that's one of the ways we can advocate for human rights. I know that the current social and political climate is a bit shaky. Everyone is on their toe. It looks like there is war left and right. I just want to salute young people from across the world for their courage, for our creativity, for standing up for what is right, for upholding the voices of people that do not have voices. As a young person, I see you, and I really hope that you continue to do that work and make sure that we build a future that we truly want, not the future that we are living in, the future that really, really, really matters, that is safe, that is equitable, and that it centers the human right of everybody. A future where everyone is equal, where there is no inequality at all levels.
Wow, thank you so much, Karimot, for this inspiring conversation. I was so honored and delighted to have spoken to you today and to lead this discussion with you. Thank you so, so much. And now I would like to invite all of you to Mentimeter again to discuss the following: what practical actions can young people take to promote and protect human rights in their homes, schools, and communities? Again, please join via the QR code or through the link provided below. And yes, that question can be related to any action you have taken. For example, me as a young reporter for the environment, we do a lot. We work a lot with sustainable development goals. For example, with promoting the right to clean environment, to clean air, waters. And yeah, it can also be a project you did in school, a community event that you have taken a part in promoting human rights, anything. So yeah, the stage is yours now. And we are thrilled to see what you will put there. And we already have some prompts here, as I can see. For now, 20 responses. So join Young Reporters for the Environment. That's definitely one of them. You do learn a lot of things from my experience. Then ask their teachers, make awareness campaigns. Then we also have educate yourself on rights and responsibilities, conduct campaigns, create awareness, social media. That's also a great idea. And report human rights and abuses to relevant authorities and NGOs. And what else do we have? Learn as much as possible. That's definitely a good one. Namely, the education is something that provides us with knowledge and can take, and through that we can take other steps in the right direction. Then we also have first start by creating awareness on what human rights are, its importance and its impact. Make awareness about human rights, get a conversation going, making posters, promoting on social media is also a good one. Young people can promote human rights by fostering respect and equality at home. That's also a good one. When we start in our local communities and treating each other well, that's the very first step and into promoting that. Then joining clubs and creating clubs to advocate human rights. Podcasts, I think, were already mentioned. So yeah, a lot of great ideas, I must say, a lot of great initiatives, and I hope some of these will be executed in the near or far future, as I believe that young people are the ones who are gonna be responsible for a fairer and more inclusive future. And yeah, and with that, I would like to maybe wrap this up and hand over the floor to Gitanjali Paul, an education program manager at Compass Education, for the closing for the event. So Gitanjali, the floor is yours. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Lovely. Thank you, Gasper. Hi, everyone. As Gasper said, I'm Gitanjali, and I have this moment to invite you to reflect and think about what's next. Today is, as has been mentioned, Human Rights Day. And so we've come together to explore human rights. Professor Sachs talked to us about the origins of this concept, and we all explored this idea of freedom. What freedoms are important to us? What freedoms do we want to work for, and are human rights? And we acknowledge together that human rights aren't just a noun, they're a verb. We're actively working to achieve them. And as Ward said, human rights is a shared effort. We all have a way to be working towards this. We also explored with Karamat that if not everyone is free, if not everyone is equal, then no one is equal. So we all have this kind of opportunity and maybe responsibility to be part of advocating for human rights in our communities. And as Gasper just said, there's lots of ways we can get involved, and you all are doing things, but what's next? So I want to invite you all to reflect on today's conversation and deepen it using some resources that the Ages of Globalization course has put together with us at Compass Ed to help you think about your own community. We talked about how important and powerful it can be to look at ourselves and our community to prepare us to engage on a bigger level or to see that difference that we can make. So I want to invite you all to check out these resources, which have been shared by the Global Schools program as part of this course, that are systems thinking resources. At Compass Ed, we're all about how everything is connected, how everything is systems. And if we want to make systems change, we have to think about systems. So I want to invite you to take some time to look at one of these two activities in the post-dialogue pedagogical resources to explore and advocate for a human rights issue in your country. Deepen your knowledge of what's going on in your community. Or there's another activity to help you really analyze and understand the causes of what's going on. We heard young people in your poll, you acknowledged you want more information to help you get more engaged, make more decisions about what you can do. So try one of these activities to help deepen your thoughts, and then share it in that social media challenge that's been going on in the chat and has been mentioned a couple of times. And I think there's a slide to remind you about this, this whole social media challenge on Our Voice, Our Power, which we hope you will use as a way to reflect on what you've learned here and advocate, share your perspective, share your voice, use your power to raise awareness about an SDG that you care about or a human rights issue you care about, and share with the world about what you think should be happening or something you're already doing. You can read all about the challenge in the post dialogue resources, and there's some info in the chat. Also, if you'd like to continue learning about human rights and other important issues, this is one of many in the series of UN at Your Doorstep conversations we're going to be having. Please look forward to 2025 and more sessions we'll be having diving into these intersected issues like quality education, global health, peace and security, things we've acknowledged are really related to human rights. Stay signed up and join those events. And to wrap up today, I have two quick things. One is a huge thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their voices and perspectives, and to all of you for being active in the chat and the Mentimeters. And I want to end with an invitation to stay on this call. This is optional. We are excited to offer 15 to 20 minutes of peer exchange time, where if you want to talk more about this and you want to share what you're doing or exchange ideas, on the next slide is a little bit of information about the next 20 minutes or so, where we're going to leave this Zoom call open and invite you into a breakout room where you are going to be in an unmoderated space to have open discussion and collaboration on human rights. All you need to do to take part in this is turn your camera and mics on, press join to join your breakout room invitation, and then positively and respectfully interact with the people in that room to share your ideas, because we really know your voice matters. You have power to make a change on human rights, and we want to invite you, it's an optional thing, to stick around and share. So with that, thank you, everyone. And we're happy to wrap up today. I want to hand it back to anyone on the Global Schools team for any closing words or to start our peer exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will.
Thank you so much for your points.
Thank you, everyone. So please click on your screen. You should see an invitation to join a breakout room, as was explained by Gitanjali. And we are excited to continue the conversations. The team will stay here in the main room and jump back and forth into the various discussions. And we will see you on the next session. And if you need any assistance joining a breakout room, please feel to write that in the chat, and my colleague Isabella can help you.
Well done, everybody. The FEE team will jump off now. We'll leave you to the breakout sessions. Ward, Gasper, that was fabulous. Well done.